Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the statements from the government, most especially indirectly from Boris Johnson and directly from Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, that we could be abolishing human rights laws in the UK. I'll be discussing the legal reality of the nonsense they're talking about, but also speculating on what practical measures they may take, assuming they're even serious. I'll also be discussing the strategic position for Labour on this because it's drawn a few questions. And initially I couldn't answer them, but I think I can now. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So also, I'll just say it continues to be hot. I may look red for some time or not, depends on the lighting. And on a legal point, I will just say I've seen a lot of comments from barristers this morning suggesting that people like me shouldn't complain because they have to wear horse's hair on their head, a stud in their throat, starched collars, wool around their shoulders, and female barristers very, very thick tights in poorly ventilated courtrooms. Fair enough. It's still hot. It is still hot. But anyway, the government have now come out and said it. They are actively seeking to prevent the UK being bound by human rights laws. It's been phrased in terms of Brexit divisions, of course. Raab is saying he wants to stop the UK being bound by injunctions from the European Court of Human Rights. First thing to point out, of course, is that the European Court of Human Rights is not part of the EU. That's the European Court of Justice. And many Tories and Tory commentators, not all, but many of them, are trying to link it with Brexit, saying, the fact that this court has a role in UK affairs means we didn't Brexit hard enough. The EU court, like I say, is the European Court of Justice. Nothing to do with the European Court of Human Rights. It's also, as I've seen a few people say, untrue to describe the ECHR as foreign. It's not foreign. We're part of it. In fact, it was Britain who set it up. British lawyers who set it up in the aftermath of the Second World War. It was created because defendants in the Nuremberg trials tried to say, oh, you haven't broken any laws. I think you'll find there were no laws against this. And true enough, in Germany there weren't. So what happened is people got around and thought, well, we'd best make some laws then, hadn't we? International laws to bind people even when their governments turn to fascism. So the European Court of Human Rights is one of our most morally desirable exports, quite frankly. So these toadies in the Tory press are attacking a British institution, really. Obviously, we didn't set it upon ourselves, but, we were very much on the groundwork there. But that's nothing new. They even attack British courts when they make judgments they don't like. But it's important to remember a few things when considering what the government are actually likely to do. First, this attack on the court and the Rwanda refugee scheme in general is a political distraction. The Tories aren't pursuing this scheme because they think it solves a problem. They're pursuing it because they know it divides public opinion. Their only hope of winning the next election is to persuade a load of people to vote for them in the belief that the alternative government will somehow make their lives worse. In pursuit of this goal, the Tories create fears amongst voters that only they will protect them from. The second thing to note is that the government cannot introduce domestic legislation to ignore international laws. The only way we could prevent the Convention on Human Rights applying in the UK, and I don't know the exact route, would be at the very least removing ourselves from the Council of Europe. Like I say, I don't know the precise legal route for this, but I cannot imagine that the government can just carry out such a move unilaterally. Even Tory MPs would not go along with that nonsense. So it's likely that the government are not serious about actually trying to disapply ECHR rulings in the UK. More using the exercise to stoke up fears of foreign interference. They'll use it to argue that they should take a more authoritarian approach. It's like, we need to do this thing. There's people who want us to do this thing. Oh, we're being blocked by this organisation, so we should be able to ignore that organisation. What is that? That's authoritarianism. That's fascism. This may well be the UK version of burning down the Reichstag. Some people asked why Starmer's spokesperson waffled about Labour's position on this Rwanda scheme on Wednesday. So it's worth bringing this up now. So Starmer himself didn't bring up the issue at PMQs. Now, this was strategically sound. I said at the time, Johnson wants to push his culture wars. Starmer needs to focus on matters that unite the voters, not divide them. He was right not to bring it up, despite what some strategically inept commentators may think. But when journalists asked his spokesperson later on, would Labour reverse the policy in government? He didn't really give a definite answer. He waffled a bit. And people at the time asked me why this was. And at the time, I wasn't sure. After all, immediately after PMQs, Yvette Cooper, Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper was blasting the policy in Parliament the same day, tearing it to shreds. In fact, if you have not seen her thoroughly beating Priti Patel up about it across the dispatch box, it's worth a watch. But then later on, another Shadow Labour minister, a junior one, confirmed, clear as you like, that Labour would reverse the policy. Absolutely as clear as you like. Labour would scrap the scheme. So that is the official Labour policy. We sort of knew it was the official Labour policy, so why didn't the spokesperson just say that to journalists? But when that junior minister did clearly state that it was Labour policy to scrap it, it became clear. Why didn't Starmer's spokesperson answer the question clearly when it is clear Labour policy to reverse the plan? The same reason Starmer didn't bring it up in PMQs. Because they don't want to give the Tory media an excuse to stick it on their front page. If Starmer or his spokesperson says that they would reverse a policy that the Tory press are trying to champion, they will set Starmer up against the people and he gets embroiled in an issue of the Tories choosing. But if Starmer says nothing and the policy of reversing the plan is confirmed by a junior shadow minister who most of the people don't even know, I can't even remember his name, then it becomes tricky to make a meal of it in the press. Trying to big up what a largely unknown opposition MP has said is not of major interest to the public. You can't put it on your front page. It's basically Starmer saying to the likes of the Daily Mail, nah mate, if you want to report a split between Labour and the government, you will report on the economy or jobs or housing or the NHS. That's what I'm going to talk about. It's not going to be on your childish culture wars. Strategy, basically. Which for the first time in years, Labour are starting to get right. It's not perfect, but at least they're thinking tactically now. But the Conservatives always think tactically. You can see how this works. Dominic Raab was already set on abolishing the Human Rights Act. That was before all this. This act set the Convention of Human Rights into domestic law. Repealing the act doesn't stop the UK being subject to this law, but it does, I suppose, stop British courts having a role in cases. All of those cases would have to go to the European Court on Human Rights. So it means that if anyone felt that there had been a breach of their human rights in the UK, their only recourse would be the European Court of Human Rights. This suits the Tories because they can keep pushing the xenophobia buttons. Oh, is this foreign court interfering with our business? Who do they think they are? Well, actually, who they think they are is probably... It might even be a British judge who's deciding in this case. There's British judges in the court, you see. And they've got no problem attacking British judges and lawyers either. But it's way easier for them to attack what they describe as foreign ones, even if they're not actually foreign. Like I said, it could well be a British judge deciding against the government. And so I do believe that the government genuinely want to repeal this act. But whether Tory MPs would go along with it, with Johnson in such a weakened position, is another matter. And if Johnson goes, it does remain to be seen if his replacement would pursue the same policy. They may do, because it's strategically useful to any Tory leader who wants to fight the next election on a populist platform. And without a strong record to support them, what choice do they have? But trying to introduce legislation to disapply ECHR judgments would be trickier. First of all, even if such legislation is possible, which I strongly suspect is not, it would need the support of the vast majority of Tory MPs. Not a given at any time for something like this, because it would be baffling legislation. After all, the ECHR is the legacy of Churchill. Sure enough, the single market was the legacy of Thatcher and there's shit all over that. But most didn't agree with it. They just did it for political reasons. But would they be politically bounced into supporting this move? I'm not so sure. The latest move might well be seen as a step too far for them. And even if Tory MPs did go along with it, the House of Lords would likely object strongly, because whatever legislation it would be would surely be pointless, because you can't disapply those judgments. We may even see a lot of public opposition to the move. I mean, we know that way more people want us to remain bound to the convention than don't, because polling shows that all the time. There was a recent poll this week, of course, and it showed the same thing. But that doesn't always mean that much, remember. When you look at national polling, it doesn't mean that much. What matters is what Tory target voters think. Not even Tory voters, because the committed Tory voters will still vote Tory anyway. They can take them for granted. They have to. It's the potential, it's the swing voters, the ones who might vote Tory. They're the people whose opinion matters. And also it's not just what they think of it, it's how strongly they think of it. Hence, the government were happy, for example, to pursue the Rwanda scheme. It's very unpopular in the general public, but not the Tory voting public. But they U-turned on scrapping the Standards Committee because that pissed off their voters. It'd be interesting to see how their voters react to a move like this. Of course, the move may never come. It could just be something they keep threatening to do, but don't actually try and do it. After all, if they waste parliamentary time trying to enact legislation that is either unlikely to succeed or has little practical benefit if it does, they can't spend that time with their real agenda. You know, whenever the government threatens to bring in a piece of legislation, it's easy to look at it and go, well, yeah, it's the sort of thing they do. You have to remember it takes up parliamentary time. Parliamentary time that then cannot be used for something else. So there's always that to think about as well. You know, it's a bit like this bill to remove the protocol, the Northern Ireland Protocol. Johnson was threatening it for a year before actually going ahead with it. He's only done it now because he feels he has to in order to secure his position. But that's going to take up parliamentary time that he can't do something else with. He was still hesitant about doing so as recently as last month. And this may well be the same thing. It may be something the government threatens to do, never actually does unless it's needed to save Big Dog again. After all, there's more headlines in regularly threatening to do something controversial than there is in actually doing it. Because once you've done it, you need another distraction to occupy the headlines next time, don't you? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.